Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. Today is June the 18th, 2026. And I understand that this is actually Men's Mental Awareness Month. So last month, May, was Mental Health Awareness Month, I guess, generally. And this month of June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. But I'm not going to talk about mental health today. I want to talk about Nigerians in the diaspora, particularly Nigerians in America, and how Nigerians have to be very careful, especially in the wake of ICE raids, the xenophobic sentiments, prevailing xenophobia in not just America, actually all over Europe. I've been seeing disturbing videos on social media of Africans being killed, due to xenophobia, of you know, African women lamenting over xenophobic attacks they're experiencing at work or in their homes, in neighborhoods, and by law enforcement, from law enforcement. And talking about law enforcement, of course, recently I saw in the news. A woman of African descent, but from Haiti, had been picked up by ICE, had been raided and detained by ICE, and then she was dropped off at a bus shelter. Apparently, and she never moved from there. She was taken to the hospital later on and pronounced dead. She was from Haiti, and um, this is being investigated as a homicide. I'm kind of concerned about Nigerians who keep coming to the United States. I've talked about how I was unlawfully swatted and raided in my home, right? It was a Nigerian that apparently brought the cops to my home. As of that day, by the way, May 16, 2023, I was an auditor in the United States Department of the Navy, right? I had a new position, new offers, various new offers to continue to work at the Pentagon and the federal government. But for some reason, I don't know, Jide Iwarere, the man who sent the cops to my home, has told a number of lies. And so it turned out, at some point he said it was the police that called him and said I was in trouble and they wanted his help to get me to a hospital, right? The state of Maryland has seen that I don't have a mental illness. I didn't complain of a mental illness. I've never suffered from a mental illness. I wasn't going through a breakdown. I was living my best life. But I found out that this guy, Jide Iwarere, a Howard University professor, has just been full of it. He's been telling one lie after the other. And it's astonishing that it's over 3 years, going on 4 years now, and I haven't had my day in court to question him. But he's made a number of false statements to my family, to my to in the court documents, and he's recanted these. Right, he made these false statements. The police said I threatened to shoot him. He's denied it. He's on audio where he's recorded, where he says no, that he never said I threatened to shoot him. Obviously, I've never threatened to shoot him. I don't know the gun. So he's crazy. And it turns out, today I was talking with my brother, one of my brothers, who's a professor, right? He's a renowned professor, one of the leading, arguably the leading philosopher of African descent, Professor Soren Osha. Anyway, today I was talking to him, and I told him something that Jide Iwarere had told me and said told his kids, in my presence. He talked about how ages ago when he was in Nigeria and we were living in Ikoyi, and there were security guards, police guarded my home, and how he claimed that my mom would send him to throw stones at Jide Iwarere for coming to my home. So he makes up these things, and my brother said it's a lie. It never happened. My brother doesn't know him. They don't talk. My mom, I told my mom had, told a Maryland Department of Health official that it was a fabrication, that the man lies. It turns out Jide Iwarere is delusional. There are many lies he's told me, but I'm going to do another video to talk about his delusions, because the hospital eventually told me that this man has dementia, but he's in denial. But he works at Howard University. He's a dangerous man. He almost had me killed. But today, what I want to do is focus on how Nigerians living abroad, if they must live abroad, please, I hope we all follow laws. I'm clearly a law-abiding American citizen, despite the false charges against me by the police who assaulted me in my home. There's evidence. But the police, they're criminal. We now know, if you check social media every day, there are cops that are being arrested for heinous crimes, raping children, child pornography, for selling drugs. Cops, chiefs of, police chiefs committing crimes, sexual assault, all sorts of things. So cops are criminal for embezzling public funds. There was a woman who was arrested, female cop today, who was arrested for embezzling public funds. I saw that in the news. So it goes on and on and on. Of course, we know of the and it's not just the cops, right? The criminal justice system is very corrupt. Of course, we know of the case of, and they work together, right? And we can see this, it's demonstrated in the murder of Judge Kevin Mullins of Letcher County in Kentucky on September 19, 2024, when his buddy, who was the chief of the sheriff, right? The sheriff of Letcher County, his name was Sean Mickey Steins. They were buddies, hanging out together. They went to lunch together. They were exchanging phones. And next thing, Sheriff Steins pulls out his gun and murders him on camera right there. Just kills him, shoots him several times, kills him. Now, of course, he walked out plainly. You can see it was premeditated. But his defense is claiming insanity, that he was insane or whatever. So it turned out Sheriff Steins had given a deposition of his deputy, who was imprisoned after that. After the deposition, he was imprisoned for having sexually assaulted, raped an inmate. And somebody else claimed that the judge, Kevin Mullins, controlled a sex ring, an orgy sex ring, in which prisoners, inmates of the county jail were extorted for sex. And the Judge Kevin Mullins, was the ringleader. That's what what came out in the media. I don't know how true this is, but I know from Montgomery County the public corruption of Judge James Bonifant. I've done videos talking about his public corruption, his use of fraud upon the courts. In my case, he's probably Jide Iwarere's friend, I don't know, and Judge Bibi M, who filed an emergency petition filed by Jide Iwarere that was full of fabrication, an ex parte emergency petition. Jide Iwarere is not my uncle. My family was not aware. My brother was just calling me. We talked today. We're just talking. He said, "Why was I associating with Jide Iwarere? Why was I, but there's certain things that he did. We Nigerians, we will continue to suffer abuse in the West. We need to learn to respect the laws of the West, and, make sure that our culture does not punish us, right, for living in the West, right? There's certain things that we need to be able to understand, right? I don't want to, my brother probably won't be too happy if I'm discussing, a private conversation and doing a video about our private conversation. So I'm going to go address those things that Jide Iwarere did that were crimes, right? Jide Iwarere engaged in an 18 USC Section 241 violation, deprivation of rights. He engaged in conspiracy to kidnap, right? Kidnapping. Of course, he assaulted me. He was charged for that. That's going to be prosecuted at some point. He was charged for assaulting me. He committed perjury. He engaged in a swatting. Swatting is a crime. That's making false information and hoaxes to law enforcement, right, to the government, calling a false emergency crisis, right, for the sake of generating a large police presence and to inflict injury, violence on the victim. In his residence, he made a false crisis call, a false threat call, by perjuring documents in an emergency evaluation. Those are all very serious crimes. And then impersonation. He misrepresented himself as my uncle and that I had no family. At the same time, he went to go and tell lies. My family didn't know where I was for months. I was kidnapped under color of law. So Jide Iwarere was in a conspiracy in which I was kidnapped, under color of law, at the instigation of Jide Iwarere, in which apparently the state believed he was my uncle and they were kidnapping me because he said I was a public safety threat. All of that's a serious crime, right? It's not just a matter of a civil lawsuit. Obviously, I will sue him for defamation. My family intends to. My family wants to see me, first of all, right? I'll sue him for defamation, without a doubt. But the thing is, the state also and the federal government, right, they're investigating him for criminal, for making false statements to the government and for swatting. Swatting is a serious crime. Perjury is a serious crime. Kidnapping, conspiracy to kidnap, deprivation under color of law, being a false witness, right, obstructing justice. Because I was actually engaged in at the time I was engaged in I'd just given a deposition in February against senior executives in the federal government, in the Department of Defense, who committed fraud, who committed misconduct. I don't have to get into the details, right? But I would not be surprised, because that's why RICO laws are there. I would not be surprised that in order to discredit me and to obstruct justice, that Jide Iwarere was instigated. In fact, that's what he claims. He claims the police, then he claims the government, he claims the Navy were the ones who pressured him, got him, suborned him to commit these crimes, right? So we don't know what's the truth, right? We don't know what's the truth, because I spoke with the Auditor General of the Navy. She denied it. She said he's lying, but of course, the government is going to, plausible deniability. They're going to try and eliminate trails to them. But I have a paper trail that they were involved, because on that same day, I was scheduled by the government, by the Navy, to undergo a psychological and physical fitness test to join military intelligence. Why would, for a Navy General Officer Professionals Program, I have the email. What kind of bizarre coincidence? Or the number of coincidences that occurred in one day, in which nobody in my family, nobody in my close circle, nobody was present. I lived alone, right? I lived alone, and apparently I'd been cautioned by the Auditor General. No wonder she was probably saying that. She knew it was going to go down that way, that I was going to be swatted, and she asked me to get a roommate. And I thought, no, I'm not getting a roommate. She asked me to move out of that building. I said, no, I'm not moving out of that building, because I can live where I want to live. So that's the thing about America. We have rights. We have privacy rights. They're just rights we have, our zone of privacy rights. Our rights to be free from intrusion, right? Intrusion from the government or any other person. So Jide Iwarere, for instance, I hung up the phone on him because I asked him not to come to my home. And apparently he thought I was rude. This is what he was saying. It's what he told somebody else. And that's what somebody was telling me, that, well, he's an elderly man and I was rude. So because he was an elderly man, it's no justification for him to go and tell lies, cook up fabrications to the police. Because when he told me at some point, when I was in the hospital, he told me he went to report me. Him and his wife decided to go and report me to the police. And I was thinking, his wife that the media, like Greenbelt Police, reported her missing in 2018 and said it appears she has early stages of Alzheimer's, and it's apparent. Everybody looks at her and says it. She told me at some point that there was something wrong with her. She didn't know what it was. So somebody who lacks capacity, right? The indications Jide Iwarere himself lacks capacity. And then they make a decision to go and report me to the police in my own home. I'm in my home. I live alone. All I've done is I've asked him not to come to my home. At some point, he told me the police told him that, well, I haven't committed a crime. So I want to know what it is he told the police. The police, however, in their charge statement said that I threatened to shoot him. All fabrications. He returns, a man I said, don't come to my home. A man I realized he had been stalking me, and I tried, he was harassing me, he had been stalking me online. He started calling me, asking me to withdraw my complaint against the government, that they can harm me, that I don't know the people, that they know important people. He started harassing me, just constantly. If I, because, at one time I would be interviewed on television, different news outfits, international news outfits, and he started texting me about, and then calling me, harassing me that I should stop doing interviews on TV, that's not what the Department of Defense hired me for. I'm like, how do you know what the government hired me for? That's none of your business. You're not my father. You didn't bring me to America. I'm talking about Jide Iwarere, of course. He didn't bring me to America. He didn't pay a dime for any of my school fees. I didn't stay with him at any point when I went to any of my schools that I graduated from. At no point. He never gave me a cent. So who's this guy? We're not related. There's no consanguinity between us. So another perjury he went to commit. He went to lie that he's my uncle. Nobody in my family even knows him. This is my brother. My brother will say, hey, that this guy is nuts. That he's a liar. Because they know they said he's old. They're excusing his lies as part of his old age. But the thing is, this guy almost got me killed. And the thing is, we need to stop excusing old age. People who are going senile and they become a danger and a threat to people's lives. My life was threatened. I struggled to stay alive as I was being tased without knowing why I was being tased in my own home. It was the biggest injustice, atrocity. I'd been falsely imprisoned. I'd been drugged. Now, Jide Iwarere told my family that I was drugged, so that I used cocaine. I don't use cocaine. And it turns out I was drugged on that day. I was drugged. I knew, and I was stunned. I didn't, I thought it was, maybe the government was doing some kind of experiment, trying to test me, and I trust our government. I trust the people I was working for, the Navy. So I thought, okay, they asked me that they want to do something with me at a certain time, and I'm trusting them. So even as I've been brought up, I'm wondering, okay, hey man, how did they do this? What's going on? How does this drug occur? What's I'm thinking that, but I trust them. That okay, it's it's intelligence. They do certain things. It's all part of a test. And I'm thinking I don't want to fail the test, even though I'm scared out of my wits. It turns out this crazy man Jide Iwarere had gone to fabricate all sorts of things. So he must have been involved in a conspiracy to drug me. He was involved in drugging me. I don't know how he did it. Maybe there are many Nigerians who work at Montgomery County law enforcement, their police department, and their correctional office, right? So he probably got one of them to be able, because I left my home on May 15. I was at the gym for a long time on May 15. So he came back on May 14. Somebody I had told May 13 that, look, you need to respect boundaries I'm drawing for you. Next time I tell you not to come to my home, you need to respect it. This is America. If you violate that, you'll be trespassing, and I'll call the cops for you. You'll be trespassing. But I'm a nice guy. I didn't call the cops, but this guy returns again on May 14, and then with a drug-addicted illegal alien, now grabbed me, assaulted me, tried to kidnap me. That's a crime, attempted kidnapping. My friend was on the phone, heard, my friend immediately said, call the police. I had witnesses. And then they now conspired with the police officer to file a false police report, incident report, Sergeant Charles Drengwitz. Immediately, a few months after that, he retired before he turned 60 because he knew that's what they do. They file false police reports. So I reported, once he was under investigation, he retires. The chief of police also retired. Was it in 2024? Once they've committed their crimes, they retire. That's Marcus Jones, the chief of police. And of course, they did it with Jide Iwarere. Another lie Jide Iwarere told. He said he volunteers for the Montgomery County Police Department. He told me he was chairman of their prison ministries. So when I was wrongfully detained, I asked the person who was actually head of the ministries there or whatever, prison was a white guy. So, I talked with him. He said he doesn't know Jide Iwarere. And the guy's lying. So there are many. I'm going to do another video and discuss the lies and fabrications and the delusions of Jide Iwarere. He's clearly delusional. At some point, I remember one time he told me he got into Cambridge University. You got into Cambridge, then why did you come to America? Why didn't you go? It's like telling somebody you got into Harvard Law School, where you ended up going to a fourth tier law school or 150th law school. You're lying, right? So he tells all these lies. So this is America. Nobody's going to say, well, because he's an elderly man and the young man disrespected him. No, this young man, I stood on my rights. I'm a middle-aged man who was living alone. I know when I tell someone I don't want you to come to my home. It's like when a woman says no. That's why many Nigerians are getting into trouble. Many Africans. I'm not just I don't want it to be like I'm disparaging, shading Nigerians. Many people, because unfortunately I've been seeing incidents, Nigerians being arrested in Europe, some being deported here for rape. When a woman says no, it's no. All that you think you can bend. Jide Iwarere is a bully. I've seen him assault his wife. He's done it in my presence. I'm not his wife. It's up to them. She takes it, right? She stopped talking to my mother because my mother talked about his abuse. My mother witnessed his abuses. And, his wife stopped talking to my mother. They didn't talk in almost about 40 years. That's her business. I'm not his wife. He can't abuse me and go scot-free. I'm going to use the law, right? It's the law. I'll pursue it to its end until I get justice, right? If Montgomery County is so corrupt, federal will pursue him. If the federal government, the DOJ, the FBI, if his children, because he has a son who works for the federal government who's an attorney, and obviously they were involved in all of this, because his son, before I was raided, I was assaulted, his son called me, and I know his son was involved in this. His son doesn't feature in any of the documents, right? But his son was saying, he probably went to go and report to his son that I was rude to him, right? Because I dropped the phone, and then he goes, sir, he calls me saying he's never known me to be rude to his dad. Look, you don't know me at all, So how is it that rudeness turned to, somebody wants to shoot or they're calling their home a military base, blah, blah, blah. But all of those are fabrications. You let me prove it in a court of law that Jide Iwarere is a madman, and that never happened. To add insult to injury, a drug-dealing illegal alien, Germa Shumi, who lives in 2301 Glen Allen Avenue, apartment 506, Silver Spring, Maryland, 20906. Germa A. Shumi came to assault me with Jide Iwarere, attempted to kidnap, and then he now went to perjure documents, perjure the peace order. I was never charged for his lies. Went to fabricate the peace order, suborned, told complete fabrications. A person who assaulted me. So that's conspiracy to deprive me of my rights. Again, that's 18 USC Section 241. And of course, eventually with the police, 42 USC Section 1983. Lots of crimes. 18 USC Section 1001, falsification of government records. 18 USC Section 1038, right? That's false information and hoaxes. So Nigerians, try and be respectful, right? Don't let this Africanness get you into trouble. There's no requirement that somebody has to respect you because you're an old person in America, right? They tell you you have rights. There's something called the Castle Doctrine in America, in the state of Maryland. Your home is your castle, right? You actually have a right to defend yourself, up to killing a person. That's why you see in the South, especially that this exists in the South, when somebody says don't trespass, they can shoot you and get away with it. This is America. I don't own guns. I'm not a violent person. Clearly, I didn't shoot Jide Iwarere. I didn't shoot anybody. I never threatened to shoot him. But I will call the police on you, and I will pursue litigation to its logical end against somebody who violates my rights, right? I don't violate people's rights in America. Jide Iwarere told me how he used to beat his kids and then manipulate them. That's up to him. That's his business. I'm not his kid. I'm not his kid. My brother was asking, why did you used to talk to him? Why didn't you stay away from him? I was not in his home. He came to assault me in my home, right? That's, Nigerians, we need to be very careful, right? We need to be very careful. Respect the laws of your host nation. Learn the laws and respect the laws of your host nation. You can't be a bully in the West as an African and get away with it. Nobody will bully me. I don't bully people. I don't let anybody bully my home. No, right? I'm not a violent person, but I will pursue legal remedies against them to the full extent that the law permits. I will pursue legal remedies against Jide Iwarere, against the Montgomery County State Attorney John McCarthy that defamed me, against the crooked police officers who assaulted me, Jeffrey Ray, to the full extent that the law permits. Whether here, whether internationally, that's no problem. I'm just waiting to be free from the state of Maryland, because I've already filed, complaints. John McCarthy is under investigation. They're under investigation, but they're rubber stamp buddies here. They've investigated Jeffrey Ray how many times, So we know that the state of Maryland is a cesspool of corruption. It's a cesspool of corruption, And Kentucky is nearby, right? Kentucky, where Sheriff Sean Mickey Steins went to murder his buddy, Judge Kevin Mullins, who allegedly leads a sex extortion ring, that exploits female prisoners, maybe boys as well. I don't know, with their sordid, depraved, morally bankrupt behavior, including Jide Iwarere. Astonishingly, that's a sort of a champion of Howard University. It's unfortunate. In any event, my name is Olurotimi Osha, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.